Title of our presentation is The Beginnings of the Feminist Press and the Yugoslav Avant-garde Context. And in the first part of this presentation, we will present the beginnings of the Serbian feminist press from the middle of 19th century until the beginning of the First World War. Then we will keep our focus on a representative publication, the almanac Srpkinja, or Serbian Woman, from 1913. In the second part of the paper, we will put this almanac in the context of Yugoslav avant-garde movement. The beginning of the 20th century in Serbian Yugoslav culture was marked by proto-feminist tendencies and actions. Due to the specific historical context, the feminism that takes shape at that time was also specific. Before First World War, South Slavic nations still didn't have their own states. They were either under Turkish Ottoman or Austro-Hungarian rule. Women who were highly educated and tried to act in an emancipatory way were active in that cultural and historical moment. The proto-feminist press of the early 20th century relies on earlier publishing projects. The first women's magazines were printed about the middle of 19th century. The female audience was recognized as potentially important, despite the fact that there were very few literary women, especially south of Sava and Danube rivers. Those first magazines offered women quality reading material, portraits of notable women, and advice for everyday life. Later, magazines for women will have a corrective role regarding women's position in society. At the very beginning, women's periodical included almanac like Talia by Julijana Radivojević, or, for example, Ružični venac by Jekaterina Janković. These almanac were created by women for women. And we have Vaspitatelj ženski, women's educator, by Matija Ban. In these first magazines for women that was continuously published over the years was these magazines, Domaćica, published, this is Housewife, published by Women's Society, and other Stepsister and Woman. Among the magazines that were published at this time and that formed the proto-feminist discourse, I would single out the magazine Posestrima and Žena. The feminism of this period was based on the emancipatory potential of these magazines. The Serbian Yugoslav feminist press had its full momentum during the 20s and 30s of the 20th century. And this is their magazines from this time. Exactly on the border of these two eras stands almanac Srpkinja, which is the central point of our presentation. Srpkinja, with subtitle Her Life and Work, Her Cultural Development, and Folklore to this day, is a collective enterprise of a group of women informally led by Jelica Belović-Bernadžikovska. Jelica Belović-Bernadžikovska, who led this project, was writer, historian, pedagogue, and ethnographer, a woman of Renaissance spirit, exceptional education, and incredible energy and courage. She is the most responsible for the organization of the work during the preparation of this publication and for its editing. She did most of the editorial work. She corresponded with associates and also wrote a number of texts for Srpkinja herself. Some of these texts are unsigned, while others are signed with initials. The very idea of creating that kind of magazine was also born within the framework of a collective undertaking. This is an exhibition of Serbian embroidery in Prague. And the creation of the publication is also connected with the actions that took place regarding Milica Stojadinović monument, which was initiated by the Women's Association. this is that monument. Srpkinja presents a generation of women writers. There are about 50 female portraits about women. Due to the concept which embodies awareness of the importance of connection and group action, Srpkinja is recognized in research as one of the most significant places for the creation of a female interpretative community at the beginning of the 20th century. Srpkinja from 1913, according to its authors, is a thematic and formal continuation of the previous project of the same name, one published in 1875 and other in 1897, apostrophizing the previous projects of the same name in the text of the almanac, shows awareness of the importance of continuous work on the production and promotion of female creativity. The editorial process is primarily based on the literary historical approach. It is partly based on a biographical, bibliographical, or lexicographical encyclopedic procedure, and the editorial methodology is complemented by essay writing. The main part of a book presents narratives about women and their achievements, and this segment is a place of foundation and shaping of the female portrait, which is one of the constitutive genres of women's and feminist culture of the first half of the 20th century, and one of the central tools for the production of feminist knowledge. It should be noted here that in the first magazines for women, which were mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, they were texts about famous and important women. In addition to the principles of representation and interpretation, the editorial procedure is based on an ethnographic approach, because Srpkinja holds a treasury of motifs of Serbian embroidery, and anthropographical approach. The text in Srpkinja try to show the contemporary life and work that is the culture of Serbian women. The publication This publication is also one of the first ones which consider the phenomenological importance of the magazine as an important place and means for the production and legitimization of feminist knowledge. The meta-narrative about magazines is realized in several directions. The editorial procedure of the almanac itself is defined and promoted. Other existing magazines are analyzed. A draft of the program of Imaginary Future Women's Magazine is given. The work of women editors is analyzed, and genres characteristic for women's feminist press, like women's portrait, feminist essay, and feminist literary criticism, are established and theorized. And then Žarka starts her part.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Hi.
Okay. Hello to everyone, and thank you, Jelena. So, starting from
just a second, Žarka, excuse me.
Okay.
We don't see presentation on the screen.
Is it possible to manage that?
Just a second. Just a second. And then we don't see Žarka, but okay. Žarka.
Can without me.
Yes.
Okay, can I continue?
Yes.
Okay. So, starting from the almanac Srpkinja, we can single out different narratives that shaped the women's scene of that time, activism as well as art. One activist line that the almanac contains brings it closer to another counterpublic, the avant-garde projects in South Slavic communities before the First World War. The almanac paradigm in Serbian culture has a specific function and tradition, which is recognized and formulated. And you can see one of formulation by a literature historian, Dmitry Vuchenov. And the point is that the almanac are initiated by those who fight for new ideas, for different understandings from the already established ruling ones. They want to pave the way to affirm new social relations, new forms of cultural life, new artistic and literary values. So the almanac paradigm contextualized Srpkinja in a specific periodical corpus whose barrier was the revolutionary youth, and at the first place, the organization Young Bosnia. Feminist and avant-garde groups also connect other aspects of the micro-sociology of action, such as collective projects and collaborative authorship, samizdat and manifest discourse of publication, exhibition projects, propaganda design to promote national art and fight against the foreign cultural and political supremacy. For example, the exhibition Unheroic Time Despite, held in Zagreb, organized by avant-garde artists, and the exhibition that Jelena already mentioned, Serbian Woman, held in Prague. The anti-colonial and anti-imperial discourse and the struggle for national liberation and unification of South Slavic people into one country is a platform that unites the feminist and avant-garde groups. Some female activists were part of both formal and informal artistic collectives, and in their work, they introduced avant garde in South Slavic cultures. Nadezhda Petrović and Maga Magazinović are present in Srpkinja, both as authors of articles and as the subject of the articles. And Nadezhda Petrović was a painter, photographer, feminist, political agitator, organizer of several associations, both patriotic and feminist. And Maga Magazinović was a dancer and choreographer. Articles about them in Srpkinja reveal a new model of the female artist that they affirmed and promoted. It is an artist traveler, a cultural transmitter, and social activist. And we can depict this figure based on the biographical data sample of the female artists, such as their education, study visits, travels, or personal contacts throughout European countries. Their essays and translation text, exhibition projects, and collaborative projects such as the almanac Srpkinja. And this new model of female artists is a paradigmatic figure, especially in the avant-garde discourse on the new woman. The transnational perspective enabled them to globalize their artistic practice and reevaluate the opposition center margin. What was margin at that moment in Serbian culture represented as the center of European artistic innovation and experiments. Sorry. Specific texts in the Almanac Srpkinja contain manifest discourse, for example, Rhythmic Gymnastics by Maga Magazinović and Conversation with the Muse by Danica Bandić. Both texts represent a manifest break with tradition, dance and literary, and the promotion of a new creative model that the male authorities and their symbolic figures will not conduct. This rupture springs from subversive interventions in patriarchal narratives of female authorship. We can place this text in avant-garde discourse or context, and the text share many rhetoric strategies and ideas with avant-garde text with one key distinction: the politicization of female authorship. And we can read the politicization of female authorship in the visual identity of the almanac, the feminist scene promoted in the feminist scene in South Slavic context, promoted the national, political, and broader cultural importance of folk embroidery and textile ornamentation, contextualized folk art, especially folk art created by women, in a vast network of national, cultural, artistic, pedagogical, and economic issues. Jelica Bernardzikovska work is key in this field. Nadezhda Petrović shared her ideas on embroidery, and Nadezhda Petrović recognized and affirmed its aesthetic potential. During her work in the Sičevo colony in 1905 and 1906, she starts to collect ethnographic material, and Sičevo is the village in the Sičevo Gorge in South Serbia today, and it was the part of territories annexed to Serbia after the liberation from Ottoman Empire So her colony, the Sarajevo colony project, was a trip and represents the trip to newly liberated parts of the country that till then had no artistic representations. And during that period, she starts to collect the ethnographic material. Nadezhda Petrović held that communication with tradition is needed to create national art from it, and that was a key idea shared by avant-garde artists. However, her concept of folklorization of avant-garde is different from the concept affirmed by a male artist because she did not privilege the epic legacy. Nadezhda Petrović spoke that folk embroidery and ornamentation would serve ennobling taste, developing aesthetic feelings and imagination for later independent creation. She mentioned that studying would also lead to positive results in stylizing lines and pictures, combining colors, and harmonizing the composition of patterns, therefore, the versatile application of folk ornamentation. So, for her, folk embroidery and ornamentation is the fund for innovative procedures and actions. And on this slide, you can see some objects from her ethnographic collection and the painting from Sarajevo colony period. And in that period, she was very engaged in representations, weavers, and a female artistic and working collective. And her work connected anti-imperial and feminist discourse. For example, you can see her picture from 1908 and her dress with traditional embroidery. We can read her dress as a political statement because it is the year when Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina. And she campaigned to support local pride and entrepreneurship on the one hand, and on the other hand, she fashioned her style to promote female crafts and applied art. She took her ethnographic collection to Paris in 1910 for an exhibition planned by Yugoslav artists, which, in addition to paintings, would also contain folk costumes, binding, and laces. And she imagined this exhibition as an encounter of avant-garde and folk art. And she displayed her collection in her Paris studio, and you can see the picture of her Paris studio. And we can see this action as informal cultural diplomacy. She mediated her culture in the French environment, and in Paris, she participated in several international exhibitions, and she had widespread networks of personal contacts in Paris. And in her articles published in the Serbian language in the same time, she promoted and popularized new directions in art, primitivism, and fauvism. Nadezhda Petrović actually tried to show that what was in her time seen as the artistic periphery of Serbian culture and South Slavic cultures, such as non-epic legacy and female artistic practice, corresponded to the center of the European movement of recherche, as she called the avant-garde. And to conclude, placing the almanac Srpkinja in the avant-garde network allows us to comprehend the formative role of feminism in shaping the avant-garde artistic tendencies in South Slavic culture before the First World War. Moreover, to comprehend the avant-garde network in the category of polycentrism and diversity. Feminist periodicals are a valuable resource for critically questioning narratives of avant-garde, such as, among others, the narrative on center and periphery, both in national and transnational context. Thank you for attention.